Representatives Javier Martinez and Jason Harper, thanks so much for being here. I wanted to first start off with giving you each a chance to talk about what's in this bill for Republicans, Democrats, New Mexicans. Representative Harper, let's start with you. What do you like that's in this bill?
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be here and great to be partnering with Chairman Martinez. There's a lot to be happy about in this bill on both sides of the aisle. This bill really is structured in a way that helps both the department and the taxpayer when it comes to making sure that there's compliance and that we understand. A lot of times there's questions that the taxpayer has, and you don't want to call the department and be getting different answers. And also you want to help your practitioners, your accountants out in the field so that there's clarity. As people want to pay taxes on what they need to pay taxes on and not pay taxes on what they don't need to pay taxes on. And so having that clarity is really helpful.
Sure. Representative Martinez, how about you? What did you like when you started working on this bill with Representative Harper?
Well, Representative Harper, first of all, he's I think one of the most knowledgeable authorities on tax policy in the legislature, and I would say probably across the state. And so it's been a real honor and pleasure to be working with him. What I will tell you is this is one of the first comprehensive tax cleanup proposals in a long time. As Representative Harper likes to say, every single year we really should have some sort of tax cleanup mechanism, simply because statutes change all the time, administrative rules change all the time. There's case law, oftentimes that the department has to change course, and it's good to keep our statutes fresh and clean. I do want to give a great deal of credit to the Secretary of Taxation and Revenue, Stephanie Chardon Clark, who spearheaded this work. And this is just one bill. There are actually two bills. There's House Bill 98, which Representative Harper and I co-sponsored, but there's also House Bill 90, which Representative Harper co-sponsored with Representative Christine Chandler, that also cleans up the code. The department decided to split both bills in half simply because they were getting out of hand in terms of how big those bills were. This particular bill was endorsed by the Tax Policy Advisory Committee, which is a bipartisan working group put together by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, on which both Representative Harper and I serve, as well as other tax experts. This bill was also endorsed by the Tax Practitioner Advisory Committee. And as Representative Harper said, it's full of things that really are designed to make the code more clear, more practical, more usable. Personally, one of my favorite things about this bill, especially right now, is that because of the pandemic, a lot of people have opted to order their groceries online. As you'll recall, Matt, we have a GRT deduction in the books for food items. Unfortunately, the way that was written, 20 years ago or so, didn't conceive the idea of you ordering your groceries online. And so this bill actually fixes a technical glitch in the code to ensure that people who have to stay home, the elderly, people with disabilities, will no longer have to pay a tax on their food items if they order them online.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, the difference that changing the word at to buy, can make. But really that, for people who order their groceries online, as you said, especially in a pandemic, that makes a huge difference. Representative Harper, you've been after broad reform of the gross receipts tax code for a while. How close does this bill and HB 90, which Representative Martinez just mentioned, how close do these two bills get to doing what you want to do?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll just first say it's a pleasure working with Chair Martinez on this bill and Vice Chair Chandler on the other. Another thing in this bill that I'll just quickly mention, then I'll get to your question. I really love the innocent spouse relief that's part of this bill. So all of us have, we know people, friends who have been through divorces. Some of them have been uglier than others. And we know of a spouse who, knowing about a pending divorce, goes and racks up a ton of debt on the credit card. And right now in New Mexico, both spouses are responsible for that debt, and that's just not fair. And so what this bill does, another great thing it does, is it provides the same innocent spouse relief at the state level that you can get at the federal level. So that kind of stuff won't happen anymore. Or they may rack up the debt, but the innocent spouse won't have to shoulder that burden. So there's lots of little things like that in this legislation. And I think that comes back to your question, how does this really set the stage for doing some broad reform? And I'd say it does it in really two important ways. The first is it's hard to do broad reform when you have all of these problems, little problems in the code that need to be updated, that need to be cleaned up, that people can take advantage of and are distracting from doing real reform. So having this done yearly, like Chairman Martinez said, is a huge part of making sure that we can do big reform, and also that we don't get cut off something that was unattended, something that someone exploits and derails that discussion. The second is I really love how this kind of sets up politically bipartisanship, a partnership, because the only way for us to really solve the big tax problems in New Mexico is to work together across the aisle. I'm just gonna be honest, my side of the aisle doesn't have all the answers, and the other side of the aisle, doesn't have all the answers. But when we come together and do what's right for New Mexico, that's where the magic happens. And so setting the stage like this, working in a bipartisan way, I think is a huge help to getting that reform to actually happen.
I like that term that you use, sort of a stage setter. Representative Martinez, to you, does this have that same feel? As you both describe it to me, I get the sense that there are cleanup items in here that will make a huge difference to specific groups of people, things that have bugged them for years or have cost them money to either comply with or just in terms of the tax. But does this feel like it's a setup for perhaps a larger look at New Mexico's gross receipts tax system or income tax system?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And I think that, in many ways, my generation of legislative leadership, Representative Harper's generation of legislative leadership, which, both of those are very close together. We came to the chamber relatively close together. Representative Harper's been there a little bit longer than I have, but nonetheless, we're pretty close in the time we got there. There's a lot of agreement across the political aisle in terms of the tax code. Both sides want to make the system more fair. Both sides want to simplify the system. Both sides want to lower the rate across the board and broaden the base across the board. Clearly, once we get into the nitty-gritty of how to do that, that's where the disagreements will emerge. But relationships like the one that we have, relationship like the one that exists within our committee itself, the House Tax and Revenue Committee, I think can really be a catalyst for not only bipartisan work, but for very impactful and effective work moving forward. Now, make no mistake about it. It took 30 years to get this tax code in the shape that it is right now. It's going to take a long time to fix it. But we're here for the long term. We're here and we're committed to making sure that it happens. And again, even though there will be disagreements at some points and we'll vote our way, they'll vote their way. Needless to say, we're going to keep working in the same direction.
Is some of the friction or the issues that we have with the gross receipts tax, are they built into this idea of receipts versus sales, in that, at least as I understand it, gross receipts almost forces us to say what we don't want that tax to apply to. Is that unworkable? Do you see that we would ever change to a sales tax? Either one of you.
That's a great question, Matt. And really, when we started down this road, several years ago, that was one of the very first questions we asked. There's the gross receipts tax on this end of the spectrum, and then there's a pure retail sales tax on this side of the spectrum. Can we can we really make it by going all the way to one side or all the way to the other side? We're kind of in the middle right now. And the short answer is really we need to move in the direction of a retail sales tax, but it's still going to have to be broad-based. So the big difference between the two is a retail sales tax, you list, like you said, those things that you tax, and there's a lot of things that you don't. The gross receipts tax is the other side. You just say you tax everything, and then you have to list what you don't tax. And really, we have to be a hybrid. Right now, our hybrid is kind of the worst of both worlds. But what we've decided to do, the direction we've decided to do, is be a hybrid still, but the best of both worlds. And that is possible. And like Chairman Martinez said, the way you do that is by broadening the base and lowering the rate. And that's how you can kind of hit that magic of the two.
I'm just wondering if that rings true to you as well, Representative?
Yes. Yeah, it does. It does. Again, I think that what we have in New Mexico is a 30, 40-year problem. And for better or for worse, it is what we have now. And we've got to make sure that we keep in mind the issue of making the system simple, making it fair, ensuring that the taxpayer, the customer, the end user can use it, and ensuring that we broaden the base so that we can lower that rate. I think broadening the base is really should be our goal, right?
Do we need to get a better handle on what the tax breaks, tax credits, carve-outs, things like that, what they are costing us as a state? Is that part and parcel with reforming the tax code?
I think due to the good work of previous leadership in our committee, including Representative Harper's, we have now instituted across the board for any tax credit, deduction, or exemption that is approved by our committee, a sunset clause so that they're not in the books forever, and a reporting mechanism. We've gotten a lot better over the last few years. In fact, the Taxation and Revenue Department every year will publish a report, a tax expenditure report, showing us how much these things cost. And there's Representative Harper showing your viewers. It's a very good tool. And in fact, every year it helps inform how much in expenditures are out there. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There are a lot of these that are in the books that are maybe marginally used, or maybe they're not used anymore, that we should be closing. There are others that don't have that reporting mechanism. And so we don't even know if those particular tax incentives are working or not. I think that type of analysis can help inform not only accountability measures for these expenditures that are out there, but when those at sunset come back, right? And I'll give you an example. Last year, I carried one for durable medical equipment. These are companies that take oxygen tanks and hospital beds and whatnot to patients in their home. They had a 10-year sunset on that credit that would have expired this year. They came back to the legislature last year. They had a reporting mechanism on it. So they had, not only did we have data for every year, but they showed up with 10 years worth of data. And the legislature decided that it was worth keeping in the books. And so we approved it. It's now in the books for another 10 years. That's really how these credits, deductions, exemptions should be working, and not, in perpetuity.
Well, gentlemen, we're just about out of time here. I really thank you both. And of course, the committee. I know there are far more people working on this than just you two. But to step into this and wade into it is something that hopefully we can all appreciate when it comes time to log on and pay our taxes or get that form and fill it out. So thanks to you both.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.